Hi, this is Siofra Bradigan, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. So, obviously, the thing that's on everybody's mind right now is what's happening in the Ukraine, and what the Russians are doing to the Ukrainian people. And it's extremely difficult to watch and to absorb all that information and figure out what to do with it. But I thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk about some of the occult and craft things that are coming out on the news. First one, of course, was the woman who confronted the Russian soldier and basically told him he needed to put sunflower seeds in his pocket so that when he died, at least sunflowers would grow in his place. And apparently, this is a fairly typical curse in Ukraine. And she delivered it extremely well, I thought, when I was watching the original altercation with the curse words not bleeped out. She was a very powerful woman and fearless, and that's what it takes in order to do that kind of magic. I mean, you can't just whisper it and that kind of thing. And then the second incident that I heard about was the woman in Bolotov, I think is how you say it. And she asked the Russian soldier if he knew that every other woman in Bolotov was a witch and that they would collectively curse all of the Russians and their penis would stop working. And I thought that was an interesting one as well, because that is a historic idea that has floated around for centuries, that one of the things a witch can do is to make a man's member no longer function properly, or on the opposite side, make it work better than ever. It's just sort of interesting that, witches have got this supposed power over that. And I actually had my own encounter with that type of a situation where I was dating this guy and he took me to a hotel room, and then there was another guy who I had not even met, and I did not want to have him um, doing things to me, and I actually went into his body and turned it off. I hadn't thought of it before. It was just a spontaneous sort of a thing, but it worked like a charm. So I thought that was sort of interesting that I had an actual real world event in my own history that related to that kind of thing. But it brought up the idea of cursing and hexing and how it works, and exactly, what is it that the process of what's going on when someone does that. And of course, the death curse, the rewind, um, the utterance of a curse at the moment of death is reputedly the most powerful and difficult to break type of curse out there. So, when women were unjustly accused of witchcraft and were being, you know, burned at the stake or hung or whatever, some of them actually did do that to the people who were there. There's not much information historically for us to be able to look at, but there certainly is anecdotal kinds of stories that go around about that kind of thing. And then I had, when I was doing one of the investigations in my local area, went to one of the first pioneer homes that was established, a homestead here in the area. And there was a Native American woman who was uh, raped and murdered on her wedding day underneath the tree. We talked about the ghost tree, but she uttered a death curse to any white people who lived on the land after her. And that was one of the reasons I was there, was because it was a mixed household of native and white people. And the natives weren't having a problem, but the white people were having a serious problem, and freaking out. So it was interesting that I encountered that in my work, like firsthand. And that was the one where the native woman, actually handed me a feather before she crossed over, and I didn't know why she did that until later, and I realized that she was handing me the feather to break the curse that she had placed on the land. And so when I came back, that's what I did with the feather she gave me, was lay it back in the earth and let the earth absorb the energy. But one of the things when people are doing that kind of quote unquote dark magic, historically, it if someone is going to be cursed, then the people or person who's doing the cursing wants the victim to know that they have been cursed, because a lot of the engine, the energy of the spell itself is sort of run by that fear that the person has in the idea of them being cursed. Um, Actually had someone recently write me an email saying he was afraid of someone at work and wanted me to give him a spell to paralyze a person, which I thought, right. If you're capable enough to actually do a spell to paralyze somebody, then you don't have to worry about curses. I mean, you're not vulnerable to that kind of stuff if you actually achieve that level of expertise and ability. So I told him that, gave him some generalized information and so forth. But really, an inexperienced practitioner is not going to be able to do a spell of that nature unless it's a genuine emergency situation and it just sort of comes over you and it happens around you because you're connected enough to the energy flow and to your own personal power and the universal energy and stuff like that, that it just sort of rushes forth. And I've heard of that kind of stuff happening spontaneously. I read a story about a woman who she was being followed by this man, and to no good purpose. He obviously had some nefarious something in mind, and at one point she had no choice but to turn around and try and stop him. And she felt something come over her, and she put her hand out on his chest and she said stop, and he had a heart attack and dropped dead. Not what she was trying to accomplish, but it worked to protect her. And so sometimes when those things happen, you don't know for sure exactly what the end result is going to be. But considering he had such ill intent towards her, that would be a consequence of his own actions that happened in the moment. And it was her higher self or another part of her that knew more that came forward and gave her the power to make him stop. And I guess in a way it's sort of similar to the moments in time when we're inspired to act a different way than normal. Like when my mother and I went to the Greek restaurant, and we were leaving the restaurant after dark, and the whole neighborhood changed, and it was suddenly more of a dangerous neighborhood to get to the car garage where we had parked our vehicle. Um, Everything had shifted after dark, and this is in D.C. And there was suddenly a very large group of men who were making sounds in our direction that were clearly sexualized and not good in any sense, unwelcome for sure. And I just had this idea that popped into my head, and I looked at my mother and I said, "Hey, Mom, let's go into our Lizzie act." And she says, "Okay, sure." So I put my arm around her waist and my head on her shoulder. And at that point, people weren't out at all. And so it was a big shock to the group of men on the corner. And there was like dead silence. You could hear a pin drop. It was very bizarre. And I kept it up all the way to our car because I wasn't sure if they might not be watching us, and I didn't want to break character. Uh, the look on the yeah on the garage attendant's face was pretty priceless, as I was very gentlemanly and opened the door for my mother because she was driving. And of course, she shouldn't have been. We were both quite drunk, but that was before anybody worried about that much. In retrospect, bad idea, but you know. And then we got in and we got away. And so anything that helps you get away is a good thing when it comes to, self-defense. And that was one of those spontaneous things that just sort of happened, similar to when she was with me again in San Francisco, and we had that group of metal heads or whatever that came upon us and were going to rob us and who knows what else. And I spontaneously cast a circle and scared them, and they turned around and ran. So the power of the spoken word with such intensity and absolute certainty is in itself an ability. Um, they talk about that like in the science fiction book Dune. They talk about the power the Bene Gesserits have to use their voice in order to command someone to do something and sort of overpower their will and go into their subconscious and kind of like make something happen. And certainly I believe that that is can be done, that that is often the case. And I know I've used that ability on more than one occasion, usually to try and get a loved one into the car to take them to the hospital. That's generally when I use that voice. But there are those moments where woman speaks and no one can argue because this is it. This is what we're doing. You're going to do this. Get up, stand up, walk that way, into the car. We're going to the hospital. Don't you dare talk to me. And then, bam, there you are. And I think that that is sort of an innate ability that often mothers end up having because of having to take care of people that are younger and not as bright as, they think they are when they're younger, and not as experienced in knowing what is and what is not a dangerous situation. So, anyway, so those were some of the things that were on my mind, but I know that Jonathan had mentioned the idea of doing a spell on Tuesday against Putin to give him hemorrhoids, which I thought was, maybe humorous, but not something that I could get behind in the moment because it was such a small amount of inconvenience and discomfort, what would be the point of it. So, me, my husband, my daughter, my granddaughter, and my friend in Portland all got together on Tuesday night and we did our own working. And it was interesting, the things that just sort of came up spontaneously. The first, I guess, on Sunday after our live show is when I started to get the idea when I was going to bed that night and I was looking at Kali, and after talking about what was going on with Ukraine and so forth and how upsetting it was definitely on my mind. And I thought, Kali would probably be a good goddess form for something like this, as, she protected the world from demons originally. That's one of her more important, what's the word? It wasn't, it was her role, I guess. That's why she was created in the first place, was to defend the world from the demon hordes and so forth, to save humanity. And so I figured that that aspect would be a pretty good one under the circumstances. And like we were talking about, I had been thinking about the relationship, the traditional relationship between the king and the land in olden times, long time back. The idea that the king was connected to the land and the land's health and the king's health were sort of intertwined. And if the land was failing for whatever reason, things weren't going the way they were supposed to, then the king would lay down his life in order to heal the land. And also the sacred trust that's supposed to be, the idea that someone who's a leader of his people is supposed to be caring for the people and the land and their welfare and their well-being and all this other stuff, and that's part of that sacred trust. So that was one of the other things that I used when we did our ritual on Tuesday. So we all took a potato, and a potato spell is not an uncommon one. It can be done for various reasons, to get rid of a connection with someone, to send somebody energy of a certain type, and because it puts the energy into an earth thing, and then you bury it into the earth, and as the earth dissolves the potato, what was in the potato then goes out through the ground and goes to do whatever it is that you have charged it up to do. So we put a hole in the top of the potato, and we put Putin's name on a piece of paper and put it in the hole in the potato. I put some fluid condenser in the hole, sealed it up with a piece of wax. It didn't have to be in there for too long. And to keep it from toppling, I put it in cups. So we each had, like, a coffee cup with a potato in it to keep the potato from tipping over and then losing its plug. Didn't have to stay for too long, but needed to stay for a while. So we dug a hole. And so there was 3 here, one at my daughter's place and one up in Portland. And we all buried our potato and covered it up with the earth, and then poured boiling water on the potato to sort of increase the decomposition process, to sort of get it going. Not for any other reason except to, like, get things happening quicker, especially since this is sort of like a cooler time of year, so things don't decompose very quickly. And then I put a red paving stone brick kind of thing on top of it, and so we would know exactly where we buried them, because it's good to know where we put these things. And then put the statue of Kali on top of that, and when we were doing it, sort of spontaneously talked about the land and the role of the king and the failure of Putin to protect the people and his destruction of the land and his need to sacrifice himself in order to fulfill that role, if he cared or not. And talked to Mars to generate strength for the Ukrainian people so that they could keep on fighting while we were trying to figure this out and not lose heart and defend the land in that sense. Talked to Saturn. I had both my Martian and Saturnian wands with me and my staff, and used them to connect to the powers that be, and so called upon the heads of Saturn to judge him for what he's doing and to come up with the right solution, the right justice for the situation, because being human and not knowing everything, it's like I could decide that the right course of action would be to him suddenly die, but I don't know if that's true or not. It may actually not be a good thing. That could actually make things worse, since I can't see the entire picture. So that's why I call upon the forces in order to point out the situation. It's like taking a flashlight and pointing to, here's the spot, here's something that's happening, here's something that we really would like you to look at and pay attention to and make a decision about. And it's kind of, that's the purpose of the ritual that I did, was to bring it to the forefront. And I know that there were other groups yesterday, that were doing rituals against Putin and for Ukraine and so forth, that I wasn't particularly interested in participating in. I was happy with what I did, made me feel like I had done what I could, being where I am. And so I feel less like totally powerless, I guess. Um, Emotionally, I feel better having done it. So then um, I did a second part because I didn't want to just do that. And so we each took an egg um, and put it also in a cup to keep it from breaking. So we all had our egg. And I went to the opposite side of my house into my flower beds. And we each buried an egg and planted some sunflower seeds to represent rebirth, fertile land, new growth and hope. Um, and of course, the sunflower seeds being the flower of the Ukraine seemed like the obvious choice. I actually went out and bought some sunflower seed packets so that we would have that because it seemed the right element to put in. And so it was like a two-pronged, spontaneous thing where dealt with the icky side in one end, and then tried to help the other side at the other end. Some positive, growing, nurturing and healing kind of magic. So that's what I ended up doing this week. And considering it was definitely part of our discussion and top of mind for many of us, wherever we live in the world right now, it seemed like a good idea to share that because it's something we did in the moment. And if any of you have ideas of something you would like to do, I would encourage you to do something that helps you to feel like um, they're not in this alone, and you've given what assistance you can, unless you're someone who happens to be there and can fight, which I'm not, and most of you aren't. Um, but we can't let this stand. This is not something that can be permitted to continue, because if it does, I think we're going to lose the entire ball of wax here. Um, It'll be just the beginning. So anyway, I find it encouraging how strong the world community has been in its response to this situation, and unified, um, almost all of them, and that is a positive indication as far as I'm concerned. Um, and I guess in a few years we'll find out what happens and how this all, hopefully sooner actually than a few years. I would like this to end much quicker than that for the Ukrainian people. Um, they weren't doing anything. They were sitting minding their own business, and then whap, here they are in the middle of fighting for their lives. And certainly some of the actions that the army has taken and the Russians have taken have been seriously out of bounds with what they call um, what do they call that exactly? I hate it when I can't think of a term I probably just thought of a little while ago. The rules of engagement, that's what it's called. Thank you. Took me a minute. And we have those for a reason. So bombing hospitals, not okay. And especially bombing hospitals, not okay. It's just non-combatants, they're the people that are stuck in the middle. They're not the ones who decide whether this is one way or the other. They're just the ones that are left to pick up the pieces when all is done. But I really loved the 2 Ukrainian curses that came up already, and I hope to see more to come. And if it's your land or your home or your family or your children or your life, then cursing is an option. And the way people are, mostly fairly superstitious, it can work to maybe stop something from happening, at least give you enough time to move through and get out and get help. So it's going to be sort of a short little thing because I don't know what else to say about that. I don't often do this kind of a working, and we all have to decide for ourselves what our personal ethics are and what is not okay for us to do, because we have to live with whatever the consequences might be, which is why I gave this up to the higher powers that be, who have more information than I do to figure out what's the exact right outcome for something like this. And I know I'm not alone, and I know that other people have done similar workings, and I think it's good that we're not going to sit back and take this because, like I said, we can't. This is not something that we can allow to continue. So, on that note, you guys have any questions about this or want to talk about it, that's perfectly okay. You can put your comments in. Because of the subject matter, I'm not monetizing this video at all. I'm sure that YouTube would not like it or whatever because we're talking about things that are potentially distressing and disturbing to people. And that's fine. We don't have to do it for all of them. And I hope all of you are doing well and figuring out ways to take care of yourself during this emotionally trying time. And, do what you need to do to stay well and be healthy. And remember, what you can do is one thing, what you can't do is another. And if there's nothing you can do, it's okay to not do anything. It's not like a personal failing on your part if you can't get in there and stop it just because it seems clear it needs to. So, all right, guys, I guess that's it. Talk to you on Sunday. This is Siofra Bradigan, and this has been Siofra's Magic Alcove. Blessed be.